Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. The first thing I really have to say is that last time I was in this building was April 1985, and I had just found out that I passed I passed all my classes actually, and I had the best party of my life, still to this day in this building. Anyways, so it's a tough act to follow, but while we're on memory lane, I just wanted to, hopefully you can see this. 30 years ago, roughly now, I was with the City of Guelph and we introduced the Blue Box program. It started here in Kitchener, Niall Ludoff, Jack McGuinness. And right from day one, the citizens of Guelph said, this is great. What more can we do? We just, okay, this is relatively easy. Let's get on with it. We had a letter from A.J. Casson. That's Jim Bradley, if anybody knows. We had a preservation park, first park that was twinned with Costa Rica. Things were really good, I thought. That was 30 years ago today. So let's just keep the time frame in terms of a career, I suppose. So in those 30 years, I've flown a lot. I've been to a lot of cities. The world's urban population increased by 2 billion people, roughly. My students graduating today, in their careers, the number of people living in cities is going to double. And cities are what's driving solid waste. Solid waste is a symptom of urbanization. So if we want to think about solid waste, we have to think about cities. I think it's important to keep sort of where waste is in perspective. So what's going on? So for me, it's Starbucks, and I met my wife. Well, it was her that this party in here. We go to cities because that's where we generate wealth. We find our love. Cities are what drives our economy, and cities are what's driving the creation of wealth in the world. So the only thing that has increased more than solid waste or greenhouse gas emissions in my career is wealth. Cities are driving an enormous amount of wealth in the world, so there's more than enough money to pay to do things right, but it's a question of who pays and how we pay, I think. So you saw this earlier from Steve. This is the Rockstrom version, and all I wanted to point out here was solid waste is a symptom. Climate change is a symptom. They're all sort of, if you're feeling you're getting old, is it your back that bugs you? Is it your eyesight? They're all kind of working together. This is the slide for me anyways, that's the be afraid, be very afraid slide. So you've heard, the Government of Canada is on record that we have an aspirational goal of not to exceed temperatures by 1.5 degrees by 2050, 2 degrees. We've signed on to the Paris Accord. The bottom right-hand square there is where we basically need every city in the world to be in terms of its greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And whether Donald Trump pulls out of Paris or not, we are not going to get there. And it's important that we start to understand just the magnitude of the challenge that we face as people in the world. Okay, so I just wanted to show I can show this whenever I'm out of Whitby. You probably can't see that, but on your right-hand side is a picture of Whitby. Same community, same wealth, everything's roughly the same. The average citizen in Whitby generates 13 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per person. This is just residential emissions, whereas East York, it's 1/10, an order of magnitude less, and that's only because of the way the cities are shaped and the way we live. So we know, as John was saying earlier, we know what we need to do. It's just that we don't have the personal and the political will to get there, I would argue. So this is just another, we often say, oh, look how dense Toronto is. Ain't nothing compared to Tokyo. But okay, this is also, all I wanted to show here was you can see the drop in the United States, Canada as well. You can sort of, this is greenhouse gas emissions total for the country, and metric tons per capita. And what's really interesting here, I think, is you can actually see what happened in the United States with the oil embargo, and in Canada as well. We know how to, it wasn't fun, it was not an easy transition, but environmental policies can make an enormous difference. And the one here that I think is most important is Sweden. You can see the drop of greenhouse gas emissions in Sweden, and that is after the oil embargo. That is a national policy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So there's demanufacturing also, but we know how to do this. I found out about this piece of legislation at a conference in China, and we tried to steal it when I was at the World Bank. It is probably one of the best pieces of legislation in the world to try and contain growth. But if you've been reading the papers lately, everybody hates it. Everybody hates it because we can't have our 80-foot frontage house. The builders can't build the houses that they're used to making so much money on. And the thing that I think has been most missing is true, honest, credible metrics. So we have this interminable debate on the green, is it good, is it bad? And everybody can use statistics to however they want to say, no, it's bad, or no, it's good. And we're in this 20-year battle about the green belt. Sounds familiar. Okay, I just put this on for, does anybody know where this is? Okay, let me put the question another way. What agency or institution would you put as probably the most forward-thinking in the world? Probably the Catholic Church, right? Okay, maybe not. This is 2 blocks away from the current Pope's parish. My point here really is, why would the Catholic Church have chosen a Pope, first time in history, from a low-income developing country? Is it they all of a sudden got religion on developing countries? Probably not. It is that they know very well that the future of Catholicism is outside of Europe. It's where, if you know the Wayne Gretzky skate to where the puck is going, it's all headed to Asia now, and then it's going to Africa. This is Buenos Aires. This is the Pope's home. Okay, let's talk trash. So this is a little bit out of date, but the scale is roughly the same. So this is basically 15 years of solid waste generation growth. And you can sort of see how the circles are increasing. OECD is actually per capita coming down a little bit. East Asia Pacific is the area that's undergoing the most solid waste increase right now. And then we've got Latin America, South Asia is a biggie. So between Asia, that's roughly where all the garbage is being, the growth in waste is happening today. So that's why Unilever is, you know, if you look at their annual report, the majority of their money is coming from Latin America and Asia, because that's where the growth is. And it's the growth in cities that's driving this. This is another way of looking at it, but the important point here, I think, is that it's the low-income countries that are driving solid waste growth. So we love to think that, oh, woe is us in Ontario or Canada, but the scale of our problem is minuscule compared to the Jakartas of the world, or the Manilas, or the Shanghais. Okay, so I'll go through this part quickly. So waste, not a big surprise. Collection rates vary by region. Africa's the lowest, still below 50%. So more than half of the waste in most cities in Africa is not being collected. Landfilling is still the biggest, fortunately. It's the cheapest, it's probably the best. Sanitary landfill is a great waste disposal option. Thing here, though, that I think that's important on this is that we often think, you know, let's figure a way to reduce costs of waste management, but relatively, it's the low-income countries that are facing the bigger challenge with waste management. More than 50% of the world's local governments, their #1 budget item is waste management. So until we sort of wrestle with that you know, that most cities, the biggest thing they worry about from a financial perspective is just picking up and putting garbage somewhere. And most of that budget is for collection. And everyone, I think we all know sort of the impacts, whether it's black carbon or greenhouse gas emissions, or increasingly it'll be vector-borne diseases that come out of poorly collected solid waste, the plague and Surat, SARS is traced back to a market in China, these sorts of things. But this is the money slide, perhaps. So this is from a paper that we did. Everybody talks about peak oil, peak whatever. So we tried to estimate, because we projected to 2050 solid waste generation rates, and basically solid waste generation, which is arguably the best indicator of how much impact we're having on the planet, will not peak before the end of this century. So our collective impact as citizens and city dwellers is still growing, and it's growing fast. And we don't think it will peak before the end of the century. And the main reason for that, or the main impetus, will be cities in Africa. So the point I'm trying to hopefully make is that if we can do things right in Ontario and Canada, we have an incredible market that hopefully by us doing the right thing, they may do the right thing, and we can hit peak waste a lot sooner. Okay, so enormous growth in quantities, and I think, a conference like this, we like to talk about EPR, and I think it's great, but it's just a caution, perhaps, that I think EPR needs to be looked at in context. So I got this from Garth Hickel from the States. We often like to look south and say, well, they must be doing it right in the States. And it's all over the board as well. And Garth writes all his papers. He's a EPR guy working in the States, says that no, the better programs are up in Canada. So bottom line, no federal coordination in the US on EPR. This, most of you have probably seen this before. It's very messy, very busy slide, but it's basically which provinces are doing what with regards to what items. And they're all over the place. And this is from stewardship programs in Canada. And then this is just an example of fees, again, all over the place. So Ontario, this is last year's numbers, but $24 for a TV, whereas it's, where's the lowest? $9 in Quebec. So if you're not careful, somebody in Ontario says, well, I'm going to save, what is that, 13 bucks, right? 15, oops. But I added the $2 for gas. Goes over to Quebec to save 15 bucks. So coordinate, John's absolutely right. A little coordination would be a good thing, right? But we haven't figured out how to coordinate selling beer, leave alone EPR in Canada. Okay, so North America, a big issue is this comparability of data. Again, a little bit like how if a developer hired me, well, maybe that won't happen. If I was representing a developer to the OMB or whatever, I could probably find numbers that would make a very strong case why the green belt is a stupid idea around Toronto. Because there's enough data, statistics, lies, etc. That's been happening with solid waste costs. Municipalities are inefficient, and then the municipalities will say, well, those stewards are horrible people, and blah, blah, blah. It just goes around and around and around, right? And part of that's because we don't have good comparable data. Research, there's a bunch of academics in here. Research is important. Also, I think there's a natural tendency in solid waste for people to over-focus on residential waste and under-focus on ICI. So all of us, most of us, everybody who's not retired or who actually gets out every now and then, generates way more waste outside of the house than inside the house. But we tend to think of waste as a residential issue. So there's been so little said about waste diversion and waste management in the ICI sector by municipalities or by stewards because it isn't politically sexy, even though it's the biggest piece of the pie. Anyways, again, data. And I really do believe that Done well, EPR can be a very small tail wagging very positively a big, big dog, which is solid waste, which is another symptom, greenhouse gas emissions, etc. So just in conclusion, so we've been at this for 30 years. So in 30 years, since Guelph launched the blue boxes, solid waste amounts have gone up by about almost double. And the waste diversion rate after the second year of the blue box, including ICI, in Guelph, was 53%. Today it's 56, maybe 57. We've spent 30 years at 0.5% improvement, while the rest of the world has more than doubled in terms of generation. We're kind of a little bit spinning our wheels, I would say. And again, waste in context. And then the last thing, I really do think good metrics and a good understanding by everyone on the metrics gives much better results. So, thank you.